curious minds, and welcome back to Tech Advantage, the podcast where we talk about technology, business, and personal growth. I'm your host, Tondow Abraham, co founder and software engineer at Blue Mind Technologies. And today on this podcast, we're going to be talking about learning skills faster. Now, the major reasons why I have decided to share thoughts on this topic is because I recently have been taking up a course by Barbara Oakley, Learning How to Learn. The course has given me a very great overview on things beyond what I've usually understood, and I just think it's ideal that I do share all of what I'm consuming currently. I know how tedious learning something new can be. The major essence of this course is to teach you ethical and more sophisticated ways to learn new things. It would make you understand why you should unlearn the previous ways you have studied and cultivate a new culture which is taught by the course. First off, the entire course covers two major aspects. It talks about how you could learn in two different modes. The first is the focused mode and the diffused mode. In the focused mode, we channel our minds towards a certain topic. We are very discreet to that and we keep our minds very rigid to enable us understand what we're studying very in depth. While the diffused way of learning allows your mind to roam freely, gives you a much more bird eye kind of view on the entire topic you're learning, and something more generalistic. This is an ideal way of grasping new learning. You understand the why behind things to enable you, be a lot more informed about everything that relates to the topic you're learning. It's very ideal to understand how to switch between these modes, and this is basically what the course teaches. Now, the most ideal way, as explained by Barbara, she said, if you're trying to learn something new, it's rather than beginning to focus and to get in depth knowledge on what you're studying, it's much more ideal to begin in the diffuse phase. You enable your mind to roam freely, grasp the understanding of things before then looking to focus. Now, let me give a general understanding of something very simple. If you want to learn how to drive a car now, the most ideal thing to do rather than sitting on the steering wheel and begin to kick things, you just pick bits of knowledge as to every aspect that relates to the car before you then focus. When you have a more generalistic overview of why you're trying to study, you then switch to the focus mode. The next phase would be then focusing on the steering wheel. You understand how to turn the steering wheel. When you get that, you then switch to how to switch your gears. If it's be automatic or a manual, how all of those switches work. Then you move to understanding how to pedal adequately before you then combine all of these knowledges in a more diffuse state and you get to learn better. This is also implemented in learning things that could be relating to technology, business, or any aspect of our lives. As a result of this entire course, I've been able to map out a 4-layer framework to learning. Now, the first layer is fundamentals, understanding the why. Now, this is something relating to the diffuse state. Now, in the first layer, when you understand the why to things, you ponder upon the reasons before you then get the adequate knowledge. The biggest mistakes beginners make is to jump straight into things and just start to grasp the idea without understanding why they even exist in the first place or what the essence for this thing they're trying to learn is. I'll give an instance. Now, people might just jump into learning something like React without first understanding JavaScript because you need to first of all get the knowledge of JavaScript before even jumping into React because React is a framework of JavaScript. Something also similar is people that would want to jump right into machine learning models without understanding how data works. So we just need to understand that we need to move from the fundamentals and understanding the why before we go into more in-depth knowledge. Now, the next layer would be learning the how. So The fundamentals, as you understand why, it then is ideal to understand how. The mistake people also do make in learning is think that they must learn every tool. You don't really need to learn so many things. You just need more specific things to what you're trying to accomplish and then understand how those tools are being used in the specific field or whatever you try to learn. So it's more adequate to understand how things work in a more specific, niche down knowledge rather than having something very generalist. You know, what this is majorly emphasizing is to master enough to enable you produce results. Now, the next layer would be project based. Now, this is more adequate to turning your knowledge into real skill. After it is that you have gathered sufficient knowledge, the only best way to prove that you adequately understand all of these things is to build projects. A little tip that I got from the programming podcast is when you try to build projects, it's not ideal to emulate projects from what you see, maybe your teacher or whoever is guiding you build. Rather than do that, do something that is much more specific to you and add something that don't already exist rather than making something very generic. I'll give an example now. If I am trying to implement a machine learning model that enables tracking for moving objects. Now, if the course that I have studied have taught me how to do that for models of cars, and when I then use my camera to record cars, like live stream, it would then tell me the model of the car as they move. Rather than doing something as generic as that, because if that's exactly what I've been taught, if I do emulate that, yes, I get the knowledge, but a more adequate way to utilize this is to build a project similar, but make it niche to myself or something that is not so regular. So what I can then do is maybe emulate it to something abstract, like I'm trying to come up with an example. I think, okay, if since I do play basketball, I would make I would make it in a way that the camera can record players on the court and identify players. Maybe from the onset when I build the data to like tell what player is what. So points are then counted for individual players via the model. So this is something that is not as generic as what I was taught, but is something similar. So that's another way to implement great projects as explained by the programming podcast. And the final layer is community. I'd never overemphasize on community enough because this is just a great way to multiply your growth. Via community, you can get access to mentorship, accountability partners, opportunities, motivation, and so many other things. So, being in a society of people of like minds will ultimately just push you to get better and deliver. So, this is all that entails on learning skills in a more adequate manner. And I do hope that this teaches you to learn better in your journey for acquiring knowledge. This is not specific to tech, this can be implemented in almost any aspect of life as learning relates to. So, thank you so much for listening to Tech Advantage thus far. I do appreciate you being on this podcast and do share this podcast to anyone you would like to share adequate knowledge to. Follow the podcast and give us a 5-star rating as you enjoy to enable us make better podcasts for you. Thank you so much. And remember, technology is your advantage.